Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 5 of the One Team Ownership podcast with me, Adam Lyon, alongside, as always, Kieran Calderwood and Andrew Milligan. Good evening, gents.
Good evening.
Evening.
So, we're 2 games into the season now, 1 point picked up at home in our opening game against Dundee United, and then, unfortunately, a 2-0 loss away to Rangers last weekend at Ibrox. And there are a couple of difficult games coming up, but we'll get on to them in a couple of minutes' time. First, we'll take a quick look back at the opening 2 games, and then we'll go on to our most recent transfers as well. There's been a couple more since our last podcast. So, without further ado, the opening game of the season, obviously Flag Day. We're looking to have a good time, to compete, to show that we're worthy of being back in the Premiership. And starting with you, Andrew, I think that was the thing we were wanting to see most, is that we could compete. They weren't outclassed, outplayed by a team that finished fourth last season, a good team, and it's fair to say we gave a good account of ourselves.
Yeah, I think that you're completely right with that. It was a good test for ourselves and what would be our first game back, of course. And as you touch on, a team which did finish fourth last season, albeit in a relatively poor Premiership season for majority of those teams from fourth downwards. But it was a good test for us, and I do think we did pass the test. First half we looked really bright, and despite going in 1-0 down at half time, which felt really disappointing, but the crowd applauded the team off at half time, which I think was a compliment to how well we played in that first half, despite the score. And then second half, Dundee United came out the better side. Perhaps we got away with one that we didn't find ourselves further down, but the red card came at the right time for us and the wrong time for Dundee United. Totally changed that game, and from that point on, we're pushing right up until that Ash Taylor goal in the 91st minute. At points, it looked like we could have got a winner if we'd got a goal earlier, but of course that wasn't to be, and we'd take the equaliser. And it was so important, knowing the next 2 games we had coming up, that we didn't go away with that game and no points. So Ash Taylor's equaliser very late on was very welcome.
Yeah, Kieran, obviously, as Andrew said there, there was ups and downs in the game, and you would think that the players in the Kelly side who perhaps hadn't played in the Premiership before, had only played in the Championship, probably learned quite a lot of lessons, and having such a good first half and then being hit by that sucker punch at the end, a lesson not taking your chances. And then the start of the second half, we were getting completely blown away by United, and that was a lesson about staying in the game, keeping it at 1-0. And hopefully things will start to turn around. Obviously did with the red card, and then it was just keeping going right to the end. You probably wouldn't have got a game like that in the Championship. I think if Kilmarnock had played like that, like they did in the first half in the Championship last season, they would have been high and dry by half time. But obviously very different in the Premiership. But you think what do you take out of it? Positives, obviously the first half performance, but you still think we need to maybe take some of the chances when we're on top.
Oh, definitely. As you said, it was a huge leap to come from the championship. Because as you said, if we had played like that, there would have been no coming back for whatever opposition. Of course, there was a couple of teams last season who would have put in a good shift. Like your Partics, your Inverness, of course, our Broth as well. But just the chalk and cheese difference. The fact of the matter is that we pushed Dundee United into their own half for those 43 minutes, and all it took was one silly wee mistake. Then uh, it wasn't pressed down. It was a perfect shot into the top corner, and that was it. And I think going into halftime, there was a little bit of head slumping because this outfit of Killie players aren't used to losing because they had that little bit of a kind of safety net of being in the championship. It was expected for them to do good. Everyone was lower opposition, which of course on paper things can not mean the same as what they are in the game. There was plenty of instances of that last season, but it was a real good test, and I was quite pleased to see that we didn't allow it to go worse than 1-0. And the equaliser, the way it was a good announcement back into the league. I think you could ask like as many Kelly fans as you like, they were happy with that equaliser. Of course, the 3 points would have been lovely on Flag Day, but you take a point in that fashion because it really spurred everyone on and gave a little bit of a thinking. Well, if this is what we can do against fourth place, what can we do against the teams more around our level? But of course, we're not really playing too many teams around our level, but definitely a huge jump up. And I would say the players took to it quite well, considering that this was a team that's in Europe. They were finishing in fourth place. They were, although as Andrew mentioned, it was a poor season last season. It was so ridiculously close. anyone could have finished in that top six. Well, not anyone, but you know what I mean. So I would say the Kilmarnock players have a lot to be proud of for what they did, but as you mentioned, really, really need to take their chances more often.
Yeah, absolutely. And Andrew obviously has spoken about a couple of different players over the last couple of podcasts. The ones that have impressed us. From that opening day, who are the ones that impressed you, and who are the ones that maybe you thought they're maybe missing from the team, and we could have done with them especially.
Yeah, I mean, Jordan Jones has seemed to have gone on a bit of a missing streak the last couple of weeks. It's been a subject, or at least from what I've noticed, it's been kind of avoided by Derek McInnes. I've not really seen him say much on that in terms of his missing both opening league games now against Dundee United and Rangers. So hopefully, whatever those reasons will be, he's back as soon as possible because he looked bright in the little time we saw him against Stenhousemuir. So hopefully, we're able to see more of him as soon as possible. Obviously, we've had injuries to some of the players we've brought in, such as Zach Hemming. But then when you look at defence, I think Lewis Mayo has looked decent at times. Obviously, he couldn't play last weekend due to us playing against his parent club Rangers. And Joe Wright, I think, is a very solid defender. Someone, of course, we weren't aware of when he first joined. Was never a name that had crossed our paths at all at any Scottish clubs. We've always spent time down south, but he's always looked decent enough in defence. And obviously, recall back to that debut in Partick Thistle where he came in just hours after signing and was very composed in that game, and he's kind of carried that on in the league campaign so far. Ryan Albie also, of course, as well, certainly a fan favourite in his early days. Perhaps, obviously, struggled perhaps a little bit more on Saturday against Rangers, but that's to be expected. Just a youngster against such a high opposition that Rangers are, and we obviously saw that the other night with them turning around that European result against the Belgian side. So, certainly made some good signings, but we can definitely expect to see more, perhaps near the end of the transfer window when perhaps some clubs are more lenient to let players go, because obviously a lot of loans coming in over the last couple of weeks, and it'd be interesting to see more of them. Obviously, Dorset had a bit of a shaky debut, but not many places harder to make your debut than in the back three against Rangers at Ibrox. So, we'll take those with a pinch of salt, and we'll wait and see how these players perform uh, later on when they get more game time and get used to the squad around them a bit better.
Yeah, absolutely. On to that game then at the weekend. Kieran, obviously, it was always going to be difficult. Rangers just off the back of that, the poor European results. So they were obviously going to be fired up, looking to respond and show what they were about. And you would think you thought that Kilmarnock actually competed really well. So kept them out for the first half. Unfortunately, undone by an error for the first goal, and then the second goal was just a wee bit unlucky. But certainly managed to contain Rangers. Didn't have too many chances. They did hit the bar in the first half, but apart from that, there wasn't a whole lot. But it just seemed that we could have had a bit more joy, but maybe just silly mistakes or making the wrong decisions, kind of cost us from getting in their face a wee bit more, especially in the first half.
Oh, definitely. It's one of those things as well throughout this Rangers team's kind of reign, doing so good in Europe, doing well in the league as well. Of course, winning the 55th title 2 seasons prior. It's been something we've always seen when they're reeling from a loss or a poor result. They always come back out guns blazing, fully swinging. And for Kilmarnock to have ridden that wave in the way they did, to only concede 2 goals. This is a side that was in the Championship last season. Not too many upgrades have been made to the positions. It's still very much the bare bones team that we had in that Championship. And to only concede 2 goals against the European semi-finalists in the Europa League, I would say that was a really good feat for Kilmarnock, having been out of the spotlight for so long, to only concede 2. Pardon me, and the manner you mentioned as well, it wasn't like it was Rangers like superior play or that outdone us. It was our own mistakes and our own errors, and you can tie that up to the fact that this is the best opposition we've faced, the best opposition that like any of these players have faced in their time at Kilmarnock, maybe even their professional careers, out with the likes of Ash Taylor and Kyle Lafferty. But of course, they're veteran players. They've been around quite a long while. They've played better. They've been in those kind of games. But Definitely, you can't really complain from any perspective, I would say. The only thing you could say is maybe we could have went to them a little bit, but it's a packed Ibrox Stadium after a 2-0 loss in Europe. It's never going to be easy. I think the only way we would have got anything out of it was scoring one goal and completely shutting off and parking the bus, but wasn't to be. And Rangers, of course, showed that they continued on that spell, winning 3-0 in the midweek. So it was one of those things. I think we just got kind of blown away by just that spirit of Ibrox, I would say.
Yeah, and you think, Andrew, it was made even more difficult for Kilmarnock by the fact we didn't really have that out ball. A Jordan Jones type player. Obviously, Kilmarnock penned in for quite a lot of the match, and when you win that ball back, you're looking for someone to release early to get you up the pitch. And Kyle Lafferty and Ollie Shaw, not really that kind of player as such. So you feel like you really missed a sort of winger, a vast player like Jordan Jones, who hopefully might be back for this Sunday, as we'll go on to talk about that game. It certainly doesn't get any easier for the opening of the Premiership, home to Celtic on Sunday at 12, as we say, and then away to Ross County the following Saturday. So again, Andrew, two very hard games, and certainly ones that are going to be really tough to get anything from, even the Ross County game, because it's always a hard place to go up there, isn't it?
Yeah, it is absolutely. And I think looking forward to this game on Sunday, we'll have to try and take what we've learned from last Saturday into this game. Obviously, it'll be a very similar game despite being at home instead of being away like we were at Ibrox on Saturday. But I think in terms of you're talking about that out ball, that's absolutely not what we had against Rangers, as you touch on. I think you saw Kyle Lafferty was doing a man marking job, a decent one of that, to be fair to him, but it meant he was being dragged back almost further back than our midfield and defence at times, tracking certain Rangers players, which often left Ollie Shaw by himself. And then anytime it went up, it would be a struggle for Kamara to keep the ball, and it would just keep coming back. So obviously we've got to try and learn from that when we have got the ball to try and use it a bit better, because we were defending relatively well against Rangers for majority of the game. Obviously, the second goal comes from when we're pushing for that equaliser. We have a few corners in a row around the 80th minute, and you think perhaps we can maybe nick something here, but then obviously Morelos of all people, kills those hopes. But looking forward to Sunday, it'll be a very, very tough game against, of course, the champions, and they've looked very well, very good in their first two games. It's not scored a lot of goals against Aberdeen or Ross County, but when watching the highlights back, it looks as if on another day they could have got five or six. It's just a bit of lack of clinical finishing in the end that's stopped those games against Aberdeen and Ross County from being a lot more than two goals. So it's going to be so incredibly difficult for us. But we do love a decent result against them at home. So even in our relegation season, we opened the season with a 1-1 draw with them. So you just never know what could happen. Hopefully, a semi decent crowd from us, and perhaps could get behind us. And if we're able to hold them off for a little bit, and if it is 0-0 at half time, unlike the Rangers game, make sure we then hold them further into the second half rather than conceding so early on the second half like we did at Ibrox. But it'll be really tough. I think that was one of the positives of being in the Championship last season. There wasn't many, but one of the positives was we didn't have to face that Celtic attack. But they've not lost anyone over the summer from that attack. They've just strengthened it by bringing back those players that they had on loan back into permanent transfers. So it's going to be a very, very tough job for our defence, and also if we do defend well, to make sure that we keep the ball well enough to go and create some chances of our own. And when those chances do come along, make sure we take them.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, Kieran, it'll be important to stress that even if we don't obviously pick up anything on Sunday, we've got 1 point out of nine. We could be bottom of the league, could be second bottom, but it's not a time to panic, because these three teams that have played so far, they're not the teams that we're fighting against. If we're being realistic, we're looking towards the Ross County game. Even then, Ross County a very good side. They're probably maybe still not going to be the side that we're going to be battling. We're looking to the games ahead: Mirren, St Johnson, Livingston. Those kind of teams. Motherwell. It's those games where the season is going to be defined, and it's just anything we can pick up in games against Dundee United, Celtic, Rangers. There'll be bonuses, won't there?
Oh, definitely. It's one of those things it's a weird mentality that I've kind of adapted with it. I would rather get these games out of the way so that we can get that momentum built up to play against the teams that you're mentioning. They're the teams that are actually going to be in and around us, get back up to speed, because we've seen over both games, we're not being like dominated or pushed aside. We're putting in a good spirited effort. against both United, against Rangers as well. Although we got turned over by Rangers in the end, lost 2-0. But that Dundee United game, we showed great resilience there. We started off guns blazing. We mentioned a lot in the commentary on the day. You couldn't really tell who was the championship side, who was the Premiership side that finished fourth. And it was really evident up until, of course, their goal went in. Then there was a little bit of heads dropping, a little bit of panic. But then Derek McInnes, reshuffled the pack a little bit, got the players believing again, and then that all important Ash Taylor thump into the top of the net, got that well deserved point. And as we already covered with Rangers, it was one of those games we weren't expecting anything from, and it was a valiant effort from the players up until that first goal, and then it was just kind of went from there. But against Celtic, it's one of those things. I don't want to say anything to jinx it. I don't want to say anything to count our chickens before it. But there's always something about a decent or somewhat decent result at Rugby Park against Celtic. But the teams of Celtic gone by that we've played at Rugby Park are. I don't know if you would really say they were better. Of course, we had that Celtic team that went invincible with Brendan Rodgers. I'm pretty sure bet them 2-1 with a Stuart Finlay header. And this team, I don't know. It seems a little bit scarier coming up, but of course we'll just have to see. But definitely, I wouldn't be upset if we ended the first three games with only 1 point. I don't think it would be anything, out with expectation. Of course, you'd love to have the kind of four if we managed to steal all 3 points, or even two you'd take. But definitely no heads would be dropped from these first three matches if we ended with 1 point.
Yeah, absolutely. So before we go on to the two new signings, we'll do some predictions for the next two games. So Celtic game, North County game. Andrew, come to you first.
Tough one to predict, but do I be the optimist or do I be the realist? I think I'm gonna go with the optimism and say 1-1, perhaps. Uh, Speaking with my heart more than my head with that one, because as Kieran was touching on, I wouldn't be surprised if we were to end up with 1 point after these first three games. I think it would find ourselves in a difficult position in the table, but we'd have to be realistic about it and realize that this isn't, as Adam's touched on, not the teams that we're going to be picking up our points against. So we're just going to have to accept where we would be in the league table and make sure we get the points against, as you were talking about, your Motherwell, your St Mirren's, your St Johnstone's, etc., etc. So I'll go with 1-1 and try and be positive. Perhaps, maybe I'm thinking perhaps a early second half goal by Celtic, and maybe we'll nick something with 5 minutes to go. In terms of Ross County, it'll be very, very tough up there. They've kind of had a similar start to the season to us, facing Hearts and Celtic, two really tough games for them in their opening two games of the Premiership season. I think they've got St Mirren this weekend, if my memory serves me right. So they'll perhaps be looking for their first victory this weekend, and it's always a tough place to go, Dingwall. We saw that especially in our relegation season as well, struggling to go up there as well, and just every time we've been up there, it's a real always make it tough for you at the end of the day, don't they? But that would be definitely a game where we'd be aiming to get our first victory of the season. So I'll go with a 2-1 victory at Ross County.
Okay, fantastic. You.
Okay, so this is my theory here. We've had our draw, we've had our loss, so just saying it's about time. Out of the three, got to get the perfect three. So I'm going to say 2-1 against Celtic at the weekend, and 1-0 on the road at Dingwall. That's my predictions there. I'm not going to explain the method behind my madness. That's just what we're going for.
Okay, fantastic. Celtic game, I'm going to go 0-0. I think Darren McInnes is a master of frustrating teams, especially teams that we're not expected to get results against. So I think it's going to be quite I don't want to say boring, but we'll certainly take a boring 0-0, get a wee point on the board against Celtic. And then Ross County, I think it'll be 2-0 Kyle Lafferty double. Here's hoping.
Very specific there.
Yeah, adding a bit more to it. So that's the games dealt with the next 2 weeks. So we'll go on to the two new signings since the last podcast. Very much back to back. Gerald Dorset or Dorsey, however you want to say it. The centre back arriving came on. Well, played against Rangers not too many hours after his signing was announced. So straight in the team there, and then winger Deji Sotona, who hasn't made an appearance for the first team yet. He did play for the B team in the SPFL Trust Trophy the other night, scored a goal against Cowden Beasts. So a good start from him. Andrew, two positions that you think were needed? Certainly in the winger position, that was somewhere that we really need to strengthen. But did you think there was really any need to bring out another centre back in?
Yeah, I mean, perhaps not. I think obviously we do have options there, and I think there is higher priorities than there. But that decision's been made now. We've got to respect that and have trust in Derek McInnes that he knows what he's doing. I think obviously it was tough for him to be thrown into his debut at Ibrox. Nothing that probably would have been expected at first, but obviously with Lewis Mayo not being able to play against Rangers as we touched on previously, then that would he had to be played, and perhaps wasn't the best at times, but he's only young as well, so to make his debut for ourselves up at Ibrox would be extremely tough. So I say let's give him some time to settle in, see how he does in the next few appearances that he makes. And in terms of Satana, I think it's a really intriguing signing. I'm not sure how many players in our history we've had on loan from Nice. I wouldn't imagine many, if at all any. But he's seemed to be decently enough rated at Manchester United. Obviously, they let him go to Nice in the end, but that has been something we've been missing from our attack. Obviously, we brought Jordan Jones in, a pacey winger, and we're perhaps looking for another one of Jordan Jones, because we kind of noticed that when Jordan Jones wasn't playing against Dundee United that we were lacking someone who could take on their man like Jordan Jones can, and perhaps Deji's the man to do so. We heard that he was apparently, when he was at Manchester United, faster than Marcus Rashford. Marcus Rashford's pretty quick, so we'll take that if that is the case, and he's still like that. And obviously, as you say, he did play against Cowdenbeath the other night for the B team, and albeit it was only Cowdenbeath, he did look decent from what I saw in the highlight package. Got a goal, and if you know what I mean here, a fantasy football assist where it wouldn't be an official assist, but I think he took the shot and the keeper parried it, and the rebound went in. So yeah, he looked bright enough in that game. Whether he'll be up to match speed at all for Sunday or not, I'm not too sure. Maybe that was the plan, playing against Cowdenbeath. Perhaps a appearance off the bench, maybe against a tired Celtic defence. You never know how that could go. But two interesting signings, I think, especially Deji Satana. Be interesting to see most of all, what he can offer. He's only 19 as well, so extremely young as well. So yeah, really interesting to see how both of them do, but especially Deji Satana, how he settles in over this season forwards and what he can supply for us. If he can try and do similar to John Jones, but on that other side, then that would be excellent for us going forward.
Yeah, absolutely, Kieran. Honestly, as Kilmarnock fans, we'd love to be able to get some more players in that would, you'd slot straight into the first team, add a bit more quality. But at the minute, you feel Derek McInnes is just trying to add a bit more quality to the bench to try and upgrade the squad, get a few more players in there. Because let's be honest, the Premiership season is a long season. There's going to be injuries. God knows how many we've had so far. We've only played 2 games, but it's a long season. You need this quality in reserve. You can't. But I think we all commented on it in the first game. A lot of young boys in the bench, a lot of the youngsters. So you've got to get that older quality in there. To be able to bring on off the bench and make a difference in games like hopefully Deji can.
Yeah, definitely. It's been a problem for Kelly for quite some time, just squad depth in general. It just seems to be we have one set of players that we rock with, a couple of decent ones on the bench, and that's just kind of how we survive through the season. But as you said, already off the start, we've had a good few names chopped off our playable list. First choice goalkeeper just off the bat. Admittedly, we did sign another player to fill that gap, so goalkeeper's not too much of a scare for the time being. So far, with Sam Walker being the deputy to Zach Cameron, I wouldn't really say there was too much that Zach would have done differently under the situation, so I'm not really too scared there. But across the whole pitch, especially in an attacking sense, it's just there's no diversity in what players can do. When you think about our striking options, we've got Kyle Lafferty, we've got Ollie Shaw, and we have Ennis Cameron. All three of them very tall, good at winning their headers, strikers you would call hold-up strikers. So there's nothing there. There's no wee quick nimble player to play off them. Like back when we had Nicky Kabamba and Eamon Brophy together, that was it. They were opposites of each other. They complemented each other due to their differences in styles of play. But when you play the likes of Ollie Shaw and Kyle Lafferty next to each other, it's a little bit too much of the same. They're making the same runs, they're trying to do the same things, and they just get in each other's road. But with wingers, like I can pronounce the name already. This is going to be great for me. But just players like that, just bringing in a bit more, just something exciting about him. It was the same when we seen Ali Bioso. We didn't really know what to think of him. He obviously came from a big club, came from Arsenal. So you're quite excited to see him. That there's a reason that this top European club is keeping a hold of him, and we've seen it. We've seen it in droves over the games that he's played in. So hopefully, Nice, not exactly the same kind of powerhouse as an Arsenal, but they're still, they're a European club. I'm pretty sure in the league and they kind of regularly challenge mid to top of the table. So hopefully it's a similar kind of case and event there. And the case with Dorset, I like what Derek did, to be honest, playing him against Rangers, because a baptism of fire, just get your debut over with. As much as I don't like to say it, that Rangers game at Ibrox was a throwaway game. It was a chance to get players like out on the field, get some nerves settled, get a little bit of cohesion formed between the team. Because as much as we might like to sugarcoat it, there wasn't really too much of a chance of us walking away from there with anything more than a draw. And it might be a little bit negative to think that way, but it was just the case. So for Dorset to get his game over and get himself settled into that team, it was the same with Joe Wright. We've seen just after signing, straight on the pitch, got his debut in, and he's been solid ever since. So hopefully Dorset will follow suit in that regard, and we'll see something better from him, or at least see the reason why Derek has brought him in. And worst comes to worst, it's another player for some squad depth, because they've got a good rake of centre back options, as Andrew was mentioning. Lewis Mayo slotting in there perfectly. Unfortunate that he came from Rangers, so he couldn't play, but play against Celtic at the weekend, so we'll see him back in action, I'm sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And with that said, that will do us for episode 5. Thanks everyone for listening. As always, follow us on Twitter, subscribe on YouTube, and all the good stuff, and listen on Spotify as well if that's your particular listening pleasure. And that's how you want to do it. But thanks to the two guys. We'll obviously be in the commentary box on Sunday, hbsaradio.com/football, if you want to tune in and listen to us if you're not in the ground. And with that said, thanks everyone for listening and watching, and I'll see you next time.